You're not suffering because the world is cruel. You are suffering because you still believe you can control it. And that belief, that silent illusion that if you are good enough, strong enough, perfect enough, you will finally be safe from pain, is exactly what holds you hostage. Because while you try to orchestrate every word, every gesture, every reaction around you, there is something inside you that continues to bleed, something you pretend not to see, something that hurts more every day, even when you smile, even when you say, "I'm fine," even when you convince others that nothing can shake you. The truth is, you're exhausted, tired of building walls that are never high enough, tired of creating versions of yourself that please, that impress, that don't disturb, tired of waking up every day to the same silent battle, maintaining the facade while inside everything is falling apart. And deep down, in some quiet corner of your mind, you know, all of this is a lie. You are not invulnerable. You are just someone who has learned to pretend very well. Maybe you've already tried everything. You've already cut people out of your life thinking they were the problem. You've isolated yourself, thinking that no one could hurt you that way. You've built emotional armor so heavy that you can barely move. And yet one wrong word still destroys you. One look of disappointment still consumes you for days. One rejection still makes you question everything about who you are. But here's what no one has told you. The emotional invulnerability you seek does not come from outside. It's not in the right people, the ideal circumstances, or the absence of conflict. It's in a place you've avoided looking at for years, inside yourself. And the journey there goes through everything you fear most. Your open wounds, your denied shadows, your unprocessed pain. Because what really hurts you is not what others do. It's what those actions awaken in you. It's the old wound that never healed. It's the emptiness you forcefully disguise. It's the part of yourself you rejected in order to be accepted. And until you face that, the whole world will have power over you. The promise they sold you was clear. Be strong, don't show weakness. Don't let anything affect you. And you bought that lie. You spent years building an impenetrable persona, a mask of everything under control that you show to the world while inside you are falling apart. You became an expert at hiding insecurity behind arrogance, hiding neediness behind forced independence, hiding sadness behind "I don't care." But there's a problem. Pretending that nothing affects you doesn't make you stronger. It makes you more fragile. Because every time you deny what you feel, every time you swallow the pain and move on as if nothing happened, you're not protecting yourself. You're just pushing everything into a dark basement inside you. And that basement has a limit. One day, without warning, everything explodes. Depression that comes out of nowhere. A panic attack in the middle of an ordinary day. Disproportionate anger that ruins relationships. This is not weakness. It's the price of pretending to be invincible. Carl Jung understood this deeply when he said, "What you resist persists." Every emotion you try to stifle doesn't disappear. It transforms. It turns into anxiety. It turns into chronic anger. It turns into a void that no external achievement can fill. It turns into insomnia. It turns into that feeling of always being on edge, as if anything could make you explode. Because true vulnerability is not in feeling. It is in denying that you feel. Think of that person who hurt you with criticism. You said you didn't care, but you spent days mulling over every word. You thought of perfect responses. You felt that burning in your chest every time you remembered. Why? Because the criticism touched on something that was already sensitive within you. If there had been no previous wound, the arrow would have had nowhere to strike. But you are so afraid to acknowledge this wound that you prefer to blame the person who shot it. And therein lies the paradox. The more you try to protect yourself, the more vulnerable you become. Because excessive protection is proof of internal fragility. Those who need high walls are admitting that they have a lot to hide. Those who need to prove their strength all the time are revealing exactly where they are weak. You are not defending yourself from the world. You are defending yourself, from the truth about who you are when the masks come off. The exhaustion you feel is not just physical, it is existential. It is the fatigue of playing a character 24 hours a day, of keeping up the performance even when you are alone, of pretending to yourself that everything is fine when everything is falling apart. It is waking up in the morning and already feeling the weight of having to be that edited version of yourself. It's coming home after an exhausting day and not even being able to relax there, because even alone you are still performing for yourself. You have become a stranger to yourself. And that is the deepest loneliness there is, not knowing who lives inside your own skin. Jung called this living in the persona, the social mask you wear to be accepted. And there's nothing wrong with having a persona. We all need some social adaptation. The problem is when you forget that it's just a mask, when you believe that you are that edited, controlled, performative version of yourself, when you spend so much time acting that you forget who you were acting as. because then you spend your whole life protecting an illusion, while who you really are rots in oblivion. Think about how many times you've said yes when you meant no. How many times you've swallowed disrespect to keep the peace. How many times you've betrayed your own values so as not to disappoint someone. How many times you've pretended to agree with something that revolted you inside just to avoid conflict. Each of these betrayals of yourself was a brick in the wall that separates you from who you really are. And now you are so far from yourself that you no longer recognize your own inner voice when it speaks. This dissociation has a brutal cost. You find yourself doing things you don't understand, reacting in ways that don't match who you believe yourself to be, sabotaging relationships that could work, repeating self-destructive patterns without knowing why, choosing partners who hurt you, staying in jobs that destroy you, maintaining friendships that drain you. And when someone asks, "What's going on with you?" all you can answer is, "I don't know," because you really don't know. You've lost touch with your center. You know that feeling of living someone else's life? Of looking at your routine, your relationships, your choices, and thinking, "How did I get here?" That's what happens when you live too much on the surface. When you're so busy being what others expect that you forget to ask what you really want. And then one day you wake up and realize you've built an entire life based on external approval, and that life bears no resemblance to who you are. And here's the cruel irony. You built all these defenses to protect yourself from pain. But the defenses became the prison itself. You're safe but completely alone. Protected but completely disconnected. Strong on the outside but empty on the inside. And the pain you feared so much now lives with you permanently. Not as an occasional visitor, but as a permanent tenant of your soul. The worst part is that the longer you keep up this charade, the harder it becomes to turn back. Because now you're afraid. Afraid of disappointing those who believe in this strong version of you. Afraid of discovering that underneath the mask there is nothing. Afraid that if you stop pretending, everything will fall apart, so you keep going. One more day, one more week, one more year, bleeding in silence, dying inside while smiling on the outside. But here's the brutal truth you need to hear. No one can keep up this charade forever. Eventually, the mask cracks. And when that happens, you have two choices. Either you finally look at what you've been hiding and begin the real healing process, or you build a new mask, one that's stronger, more convincing, and continue bleeding inside. The question remains, how long can you keep pretending? Here's the truth that will hurt. No one has the power to destroy you emotionally unless there is something inside you that was already broken. Read that again, because it changes everything. When someone rejects you and you feel like the world has ended, the problem isn't the rejection. It's what you believe about yourself that needs external validation to sustain itself. When criticism brings you down for days, it's not the criticism that's cruel. It's the voice inside you that always knew you weren't good enough, just waiting for confirmation. When betrayal makes you swear never to trust again, it's not just about the person who betrayed you. It's about all the times you were abandoned, neglected, used. Old wounds that were never treated and now bleed again. What hurts you isn't out there, it's in here. And that's the most liberating and frightening revelation you can have. Jung had a visceral way of explaining this. He said that we have psychic wounds, emotional complexes, like time bombs in the unconscious waiting to be activated. When something in the outside world presses the right button, the explosion happens. But the button has always been in you. The bomb has always been yours. The world only revealed what you had been denying. Think of it as an out-of-tune musical instrument. When someone plays a specific note, the instrument resonates shrill. But the problem isn't with the person who played the note. It's with the instrument that wasn't tuned. Similarly, when someone says or does something and you react disproportionately, the issue isn't what was said or done. It's the internal frequency that it activated in you. That's why two people can go through the same experience and react in completely different ways. One man is betrayed and after the initial pain, rebuilds his life with clarity. Another man is betrayed and spends years bitter, unable to connect again. One woman is criticized at work and uses the feedback to improve. Another woman is criticized and spirals into self-deprecation. Same situation, opposite reactions. Why? Because it's not about what happens to you. It's about what's already inside you when it happens. If you have a deep wound of abandonment from childhood, a simple "I need space" from your partner will sound like total rejection. If you grew up feeling like you were never good enough, any criticism will seem like confirmation that you are a failure. If you learned early on that love is conditional, you will spend your life trying to earn affection through performance, and any failure will seem catastrophic. These wounds are like distorted filters through which you see the world. Someone arrives 5 minutes late and you interpret it as disrespect. A friend doesn't respond to a message right away, and you create a whole drama of abandonment. Your partner has a bad day and you assume they don't love you anymore. Your boss asks you to redo a job and you read it as you are incompetent. Someone disagrees with you and you feel it as a personal attack. But none of this is real. It's just the wound speaking, the wound interpreting, the wound turning neutral situations into existential threats. And worst of all, you defend these distorted interpretations tooth and nail, because recognizing that you are distorting reality means looking at the wound, and looking at the wound hurts more than blaming the world. So you prefer to believe that everyone else is the problem, that people are bad, that the world is unfair, that you are unlucky. Any narrative will do, as long as it spares you from facing what is inside. You construct elaborate legal cases to prove that the pain comes from outside. You gather evidence. You recall each situation. You repeat the story to friends until everyone agrees that you were the victim. And maybe you were. Maybe the person really did act badly. But even when the external situation is bad, the intensity of your pain still reveals something about you, not about the world. But you don't want to accept that, because accepting it means taking responsibility. And responsibility hurts more than blaming others. It's easier to say so-and-so hurt me than to acknowledge so-and-so triggered a pain I already carried. It's more comfortable to believe that the world is the problem than to face the internal mess you've been avoiding for years. And here's the crucial point. As long as you blame the outside world, you remain a hostage. Because if your pain depends on the behavior of others, you will never be free. You will live on an emotional seesaw, elated when they treat you well, devastated when they treat you badly. Your inner peace will always be at the mercy of forces you cannot control. You have handed over control of your emotional stability to the outside world, and now you are a slave to circumstances. The illusion of control is your prison. You believe that if you are kind enough, no one will hurt you. If you are competent enough, no one will criticize you. If you are attractive enough, no one will reject you. If you are useful enough, no one will abandon you. But that is a lie. People will do what they will do. And no matter how perfect you try to be, someone will still disappoint you, judge you, abandon you. Not because you're not good enough, but because you can't control the world. You can't control other people's choices. You can't guarantee that no one will ever hurt you again. And as long as you try, you will live in constant tension, trying to predict the unpredictable, trying to avoid the inevitable. Think about how much energy you waste on this, analyzing every word before you speak, calculating every move so as not to offend anyone, shaping your personality according to who is in the room. You become an emotional chameleon, always adjusting, always adapting, always betraying yourself to fit in. And even then, it doesn't work, because external control is an illusion. And the more you try to control how others see you, the more you lose control over who you really are. Jung knew this. That's why he said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Translation: as long as you don't look at your inner wounds, you will continue to blame external circumstances. You will think it's bad luck, that people are bad, that the world is cruel, when in fact you are just repeating the same pattern, attracting situations that activate exactly what you have not healed. Freedom does not come from controlling what is outside. It comes from integrating what is inside. And that requires the courage to face a brutal truth. You have a part in your own pain, not because you are guilty, but because you carry within you the triggers that turn normal situations into emotional catastrophes. And as long as these triggers remain unconscious, invisible, denied, you will continue to be hurt by the same things over and over again without understanding why. And now we come to the territory that few have the courage to explore, because this inner wound, this emotional complex that explodes when activated, has a name in Jungian psychology: the shadow. And it is not just a poetic metaphor. It is a real active force pulsing within you, governing choices you think are conscious, sabotaging plans you swear you want to carry out, repeating patterns you promise you will break. The shadow is everything you have rejected in yourself in order to be accepted, everything you have hidden in order to fit in, everything you denied to maintain the image you built. It is the anger you could never express, the sadness you were taught to swallow, the selfishness that was condemned as a flaw, the sexuality that was shamed, the ambition that was judged as arrogance, the need for affection that was ridiculed as weakness. Jung said that the shadow contains gold, that within this dark and rejected territory there are valuable aspects of who you are: strength, creativity, authenticity, vitality. But you can't access that gold because you're so afraid of the dark that you never go down there. You prefer to live on the illuminated, controlled, acceptable surface, while everything that could set you free rots in the depths. And here's the problem. What you don't recognize in yourself, you project onto others. That person who irritates you deeply for no apparent reason, they are probably mirroring something you deny in yourself. That behavior you vehemently condemn in others, it probably exists in you in some way, but you refuse to admit it. That quality you envy in someone? It's probably something you repressed in yourself, thinking you weren't allowed to be that way. Think about the person who irritates you just by existing. That coworker who drives you crazy. That family member you can't stand. What exactly bothers you about them? The arrogance, the emotional fragility, the need for attention, passivity, aggressiveness? Now ask yourself, is there a version of this in you that you fiercely deny? Because usually what irritates us most in others is exactly what we repress most in ourselves. That's why you repeat the same mistakes. You always choose the same type of toxic partner. You always fall into the same professional trap. You always react in the same destructive way when you feel threatened. Because the shadow operates automatically. It acts before your consciousness realizes it. It decides before you think. And then you look at the result and ask yourself, why did I do that again? Because you weren't in control. Your shadow was. Think about that moment when you exploded at someone over something small. The person just made a harmless comment and you reacted as if you had been attacked. Or that time you sabotaged a relationship that was going well by inventing problems where there were none. Or when you rejected an incredible opportunity for fear of not being capable, even though you knew you were capable. Or when you hurt someone you loved and then couldn't explain why. That wasn't you consciously making decisions. It was your shadow, carrying old fears, limiting beliefs, unhealed wounds, taking control. And the scariest thing, as long as you don't illuminate that shadow, as long as you don't bring it into consciousness, you are being controlled by forces you don't even know. Jung was blunt. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. You look back and see a pattern of failures, ruined relationships, missed opportunities, and you say it's bad luck, that the world conspired against you, that people always disappoint you. But it's not fate, it's repetition. It's the shadow recycling the same traumas, reliving the same dynamics, creating the same situations that confirm what you've always believed about yourself, about others, about life. And you know what the cruelest part is? The shadow uses your defenses against you. That need for control you develop to protect yourself, it becomes rigidity that pushes people away. That forced independence you created so you wouldn't need anyone, it becomes isolation that leaves you alone. That strength you use to never show weakness, it becomes coldness that destroys intimacy. You think you're protecting yourself, but you're just building an ever smaller prison. The shadow also feeds on your denial. The more you say, I would never be like that, the stronger it gets. The more you pride yourself on not having certain flaws, the more blind you become to the subtle ways they manifest in you. The person who prides themselves on never lying is sometimes the one who lies to themselves the most. The one who boasts of never being cruel is sometimes the most passive-aggressive. The one who swears never to be selfish is sometimes so self-centered that they cannot see the real needs of others. And there's more. The shadow doesn't just hold negative characteristics. It also contains undeveloped potential. That talent you never explored because someone said it wasn't practical. That courage you stifled because they called you reckless. That sensitivity you buried because they made you believe it was weakness. All of this is in the shadow too. Imprisoned vital forces, unrealized potential, pieces of who you could be if you weren't so afraid of displeasing others. But you can't fight what you can't see. And that's exactly why you keep getting hurt, keep reacting, keep sabotaging yourself. Because you're fighting ghosts, trying to solve external problems when the real battle is inside. Blaming people when the enemy is the part of yourself you refuse to know. And as long as you keep that part in the dark, it keeps you in the dark. So what to do with all this? How do you deal with an enemy that lives inside you? How do you face something you've spent your whole life avoiding? Jung's answer is both simple and frightening. You stop fighting and start integrating. You stop denying and start accepting. You stop running away and start looking, really looking, at who you are when no one is watching, when the masks come off, when you no longer need to pretend. This process has a name, individuation. And it's not about becoming perfect. It's about becoming whole. It's about bringing to light everything you've hidden in the shadows and saying, this is also mine. This is also part of who I am. Not to be proud of it, not to celebrate flaws, but to be aware, to have choice, to have real control, not the illusion of control you've been chasing. Because as long as you deny parts of yourself, they control you. But when you acknowledge, when you integrate, when you accept, then you have power. The power to choose how to act. The power not to be dragged down by every trigger. The power to feel without being destroyed by what you feel. Individuation is the act of becoming who you really are, not what they tried to make you. It is dismantling layer by layer all the lies you have told yourself about who you should be. It is confronting all the false versions you have created to please, to fit in, to survive. And it is discovering, at the center of it all, who you have always been when no one was asking you to be different. But this path is not romantic. It is not a self-help journey where you find your true essence and everything becomes light and beautiful. It is a descent into your personal hell. It is looking at everything you are ashamed of being. It is accepting that you have anger, envy, fear, selfishness, cruelty, and that denying it only makes these forces grow in the dark. Jung knew this. That's why he said that individuation requires the dissolution of the persona, that social mask you wear. And dissolving the persona hurts, because it means admitting that much of what you thought you were was just performance. It means recognizing that you have betrayed yourself so many times to maintain approval that you no longer know where the character ends and you begin. It means facing the shame of realizing how many decisions you made based on fear of judgment, how many dreams you abandoned because someone doubted you, how many relationships you destroyed because you were afraid of intimacy, how many times you chose security over truth, how many times you betrayed your own soul so as not to disappoint strangers. But it is precisely in this symbolic death that freedom lies, when you stop trying to be strong and accept that sometimes you are weak, when you stop pretending you don't need anyone and admit that you need connection, when you stop hiding your flaws and recognize that you are human, flawed, imperfect. And that's okay, because real strength doesn't come from perfection. It comes from integration, from the ability to look at your own darkness and not fall apart, to feel anger without becoming violent, to feel fear without becoming paralyzed, to feel sadness without drowning in it. That's emotional maturity, not the absence of difficult emotions, but the ability to be with them without being overwhelmed by them. And when you do that, something extraordinary happens. People lose the power to destroy you, not because you've turned to stone, but because there are no more secret buttons inside you waiting to be pressed. There are no more open wounds that any word can infect. There are no more shadows that others can use against you, because you already know them. You've already accepted them. You've already integrated them. You will still feel pain, but you will not lose yourself in it. You will still be hurt, but you will not destroy yourself because of it. You will still face rejection, criticism, betrayal. But these things will no longer define you, because you know who you are. You know yourself deeply, and no one can take that away from you. Jung called this state of self-realization, the self that is not the small, controlling, defensive ego, but the self that integrates everything, light and shadow, strength and weakness, beauty and ugliness. It is at this point that you become truly unshakable, not because nothing affects you, but because you have a center so solid, so conscious, so integrated that it can be shaken without breaking. It's like a tree with deep roots. The wind can shake the branches, it can even tear off some leaves. But the tree remains because its roots touch something solid, something that goes beyond the surface, something that cannot be shaken by the storms of life. And that something is you, the real you, not the character you created to survive. But to get there, you need to accept an even harder truth. And that's what we need to talk about now. Because there is something you are still trying to avoid. Something that all these protective strategies, all these defenses, all these masks were created to escape. Suffering itself. You learned early on that pain is the enemy. That suffering is failure. That if you're feeling something bad, something went wrong. And so you spent your whole life running away. Running away from sadness, rejection, vulnerability, failure. As if happiness were the absence of pain. As if living well meant never getting hurt. But Jung saw suffering in a radically different way. It wasn't a problem to be solved. It was a messenger to be listened to. Pain doesn't come to destroy you. It comes to wake you up. It comes to show you where you are living a lie, where you are betraying yourself, where you are refusing to grow. Jung had a powerful phrase about this. Depression is like a lady in black. If she shows up, don't send her away. Invite her to sit down, offer her coffee, and listen to what she has to say. But what do? You try to send her away. You take medication to silence her. You distract yourself until you don't feel it anymore. You do anything to avoid hearing the message. And the message is always the same. Something in your life is wrong. Something needs to change. You're living against yourself. And as long as you don't listen, as long as you don't adjust your course, the pain will continue to knock on your door, louder and louder, more and more insistent. That's why you suffer so much. Not because the world is cruel, but because you are at war with yourself. There is a part of you that wants to grow, evolve, express yourself, live authentically. And another part that tries to keep everything as it is, safe, controlled, predictable. And it is in this tension that pain is born. Think about the biggest transformations in your life, the most profound changes you've ever gone through. They did not come from happy moments. They came from crises, from ruptures, from losses, from moments when everything fell apart and you had no choice but to rebuild. The breakup that forced you to get to know yourself better. the failure that showed you what really matters, the betrayal that taught you to trust yourself before trusting others, the loss that revealed what you truly value. Suffering is not punishment. It is the method life uses to push you where you need to go, but are afraid to go alone. It is the chisel that sculpts who you are. And the more you resist, the more it hurts. The more you fight against the pain, the more it persists. Because what you resist persists, and that goes for suffering too. Jung understood that the process of individuation, of becoming who you really are, necessarily involves suffering. Not because he wanted people to suffer, but because growth requires death. Death of the inflated ego, death of comfortable illusions, death of the person you pretended to be. And every death hurts. It's like a butterfly emerging from its cocoon. The process is painful, even violent. If you help the butterfly emerge faster, thinking you are alleviating its suffering, it dies. Because it is precisely that struggle, that effort, that suffering that strengthens its wings so that it can fly. Without pain, there is no transformation. Without crisis, there is no growth. And that's why running away from pain doesn't make you stronger. It makes you more fragile. Every time you avoid feeling, you miss an opportunity to grow. Every time you numb your sadness, you prevent healing. Every time you deny your anger, you turn it into chronic resentment. Every time you escape fear, you feed it. The way forward is not to avoid suffering. It is to go through it. It is to feel it deeply. It is to cry when you need to cry. It is to break when you need to break. It is to collapse when you need to collapse. Because it is on the other side of that rupture that you find who you really are. It is at rock bottom that you touch the solid rock on which you can rebuild. But you are still afraid. Afraid that if you allow yourself to feel everything, you will lose yourself. Afraid that the pain will not end. Afraid that if you open the wound, it will consume you. And it is understandable. Because no one taught you how to be with pain. They only taught you to run away from it. But the truth is that the pain you avoid grows. The pain you face diminishes. Not because it disappears, but because you grow. You expand to contain the suffering without being defined by it. You become greater than the pain. And that's when everything changes. Think about it. When you were a child, losing a toy seemed like the end of the world. The pain was disproportionate because you were too small to contain it. But today, losing a toy doesn't affect you. Not because the loss has changed, but because you've grown. You've become bigger than that pain. The same is true of emotional suffering. The more you grow internally, the more you can contain without being destroyed. And it's precisely the act of facing pain that makes you grow. Every time you consciously go through suffering, you expand your ability to be with life as it is, not as you would like it to be. You develop real resilience. Not the false resilience of pretending that everything is fine, but the genuine ability to feel deeply without falling apart. And then finally, you are ready to understand what it means to be truly invulnerable. And here we come to the point of no return. Because there is one last illusion you need to let go of before you can be truly free. A belief so deep, so ingrained, that you don't even realize it's there, commanding every reaction, every fear, every decision. The illusion is this: you believe you need to be ready before you can live. That you need to be healed before you can allow yourself to be happy. That you need to be strong before you can allow yourself to feel. That you need to have all the answers before you can take the next step. And while you wait for this readiness that never comes, life passes you by. And you continue to watch from afar, postponing, preparing, protecting yourself, but never really living. But the truth is brutal. You will never be ready. You will never be completely healed. You will never reach a point where nothing affects you anymore. And that is not a life sentence. It is the door to freedom. Because when you accept that there will always be imperfection, there will always be pain, there will always be something unresolved, you stop waiting for permission to live and start living despite everything. Mindfulness is not a state of permanent enlightenment where you float above human problems. It is the ability to be completely present with what is, including discomfort, uncertainty, imperfection. It is knowing that you are afraid and acting anyway. It is recognizing that you are hurt and not letting the wound define who you are. It is feeling the pain without building an identity around it. Jung understood this when he spoke of the self-realized person. It is not someone who has transcended humanity. It is someone who has embraced it completely, who has integrated light and shadow, who has accepted being simultaneously strong and fragile, wise and confused, courageous and fearful, who has stopped fighting their own nature and started dancing with it. And when you reach that point, something changes in the way you relate to pain. It doesn't disappear, but it loses its power to destroy you. Because you have developed the inner space to contain it. You have become greater than the suffering, not through denial or repression, but through the expansion of consciousness. Think of a drop of ink falling into a glass of water. The water becomes dark, cloudy, almost black, but the same drop falling into the ocean, it disappears, Not because the ink has ceased to exist, but because the ocean is so vast that it can absorb it without being altered. You need to become the ocean. Not so that pain doesn't reach you, but so that when it does, you are big enough to contain it without losing yourself in it. And this inner vastness comes from awareness, from the ability to observe your thoughts without being your thoughts, to feel emotions without being the emotions, to have experiences without being defined by them. It's the difference between saying I am angry and I am anger, between I am going through a crisis and I am a person in crisis. It seems subtle, but it changes everything. Because when you identify completely with an emotional state, you get stuck in it. But when you recognize that you are experiencing that state, you create separation. You remember that there is a you beyond that emotion, a you that was there before it arrived and will be there after it passes. And that you, that conscious observer, that unchanging center, is where your true strength lies. People will continue to disappoint you. Life will continue to challenge you. Difficult situations will continue to arise. But when you are fully aware, when you know deeply who you are, these things do not destabilize you. You feel them, you process them, you go through them, but you don't get lost in them. It's like being in a storm. If you are the leaf, you will be blown away by the wind. If you are the small tree, you may be uprooted. But if you are the mountain, the storm passes you by and you remain. Not because you are insensitive to the storm, but because you have a foundation, a depth, a solidity that goes beyond superficial circumstances. And that foundation is built not by avoiding storms, but by consciously going through each one. Every pain you face without running away anchors you more deeply. Every fear you acknowledge without being overwhelmed strengthens you. Every wound you integrate completes you a little more. But here's the ultimate paradox. And pay attention, because this is the key to everything. You become untouchable exactly when you stop trying to be untouchable. When you give up the battle to never feel pain and simply accept that pain is part of being alive. When you abandon the fantasy of controlling the world and begin to know yourself so deeply that nothing external can make you forget who you are. Because emotional invulnerability doesn't mean that nothing affects you. It means that when something affects you, you don't fragment. You feel, you process, you grow, and you remain whole. Not because you are made of stone, but because you are fertile ground where even pain can make something new grow. And when you live from this place of integrated consciousness, the world loses its power to control you. Not because you have closed yourself off to the world, but because you have opened yourself completely to yourself. And in this deep encounter with who you really are, you find a peace that no one can take away. A strength that does not depend on circumstances. A freedom that does not need permission. After descending to the bottom, facing the shadow, going through the pain, dissolving the masks, what remains? You, simply you, without defenses, without performances, without the desperate need to prove something to the world or to yourself. And this naked, exposed, unarmored version. Ironically, this is the strongest you have ever been, because when you have nothing left to hide, there is nowhere to hurt you. When you have recognized your own flaws, the criticism of others loses its venom. When you have accepted your own shadows, no one can use them against you. When you already know who you are deep down, outside opinions become just background noise. This is the paradox Jung tried to show us. True invulnerability comes from radical vulnerability. It comes from being so exposed, so honest, so integrated with yourself that there are simply no more blind spots where others can hit you. Everything that could be used against you, you already know. Everything that could embarrass you, you have already accepted. Everything that could destroy you, you have already gone through. And then you realize something liberating. People only have power over you when there is something inside you that agrees with their narrative. When someone criticizes you and it hurts too much, it's because there is a part of you that believes that criticism. When someone rejects you and you fall apart, it's because there is a part of you that always knew you weren't worthy of love. When someone betrays you and you lose faith in humanity, it's because there's a part of you that always expected to be abandoned. But when you integrate these beliefs, when you bring them to light and question them, when you heal these wounds at their root, other people's words lose their power to resonate. They find no internal echo. They hit a wall of self-knowledge and simply bounce off. This does not mean that you become indifferent. It does not mean that you will not feel. It means that you will feel in a clean, clear, conscious way, without the distorted filters of the unhealed wound. You will feel the real pain of the situation, not the pain amplified by old trauma. And that real pain is bearable. It is processable. It is human. And here is the reward for this whole journey. You can finally live without fear. Not because nothing bad will happen, but because you know you can handle whatever comes your way. You've been to rock bottom and found that you can survive there. You faced your own demons and learned that they're not as powerful as they seemed in the dark. You've walked through your own dark night of the soul and found that there is light on the other side. You can truly relate to others now, without fear of abandonment because you won't abandon yourself, without fear of rejection because you won't reject yourself, without fear of betrayal because you won't betray yourself. And when you stop betraying yourself, abandoning yourself, rejecting yourself, the version that others create hurts less. It still hurts, but it doesn't destroy you because you have yourself, and that's enough. You can take risks now. You can try new things, pursue dreams, express truths, not because success is guaranteed, but because failure will no longer annihilate you. You have learned that identity is not built on external achievements. It is built on a deep knowledge of who you are, and no one can take that away from you. You can feel now, deeply, intensely, completely. You can love without fear of losing because you know that real love happens within you, not in the other person. You can suffer without fear of not surviving because you have survived before. You can rejoice without fear that happiness will be taken away because you know that true peace does not depend on circumstances. And life, this life that once seemed like a minefield where any step could blow you up, now reveals itself for what it is, a journey, with ups and downs, with light and shadow, with joy and pain. But you no longer need to control every aspect of it. You can simply be present. You can simply live. Jung said that the goal is not perfection, but completeness. And you are complete now, not because you have solved all your problems, but because you have integrated all the parts, the beautiful and the ugly parts, the strong and the fragile parts, the light and the dark parts. And in this wholeness, in this radical acceptance of all that you are, you find something you have always sought outside: peace. So, if you've come this far on this journey, start by asking yourself, what part of myself am I still denying? What aspect of my shadow do I continue to project onto others? Where am I still pretending to be someone I'm not? And then, with courage, look at these answers. Not to judge yourself, but to know yourself. Because each layer of self-knowledge is a layer of freedom. What inside you still waits for the world's permission to exist? If you've come this far, you've already taken a step beyond most people. You watch the videos, you reflect on each idea. Now the question is, how far do you want to go with this? If you want to take the next step and truly apply this knowledge to your life, the White Rabbit codes are ready for you. The link is in the video description. Remember, success is a decision. The choice is yours. Count on me and follow the White Rabbit.